No.
Good afternoon.
Rich Day, members of the Judiciary. My name is Matt Hudson. I'm grateful to be before you on this very important bill seeking racial equity, given the very ways I have been deprived of that very notion over the 33 years I have served as a wrongfully convicted man. When I say programs, so that it's clear, programs are minimums, furloughs, pre-releases, visiting rooms, religious services, classification, education, including vocational training, cultural education, reentry access through the DOC program officers, whose duty it is to ensure that a person is ready for release, all which Black and brown people are substantially denied access with no relief. To further put in context, in all of the existing institutions, there is a majority of white administrators, white correctional program officers, white reentry officers, and the majority of white correctional officers that do not and cannot identify with Black and brown experiences and the challenges that they face. For example, officers and administrators alike weaponize neutral language policies on their face to discriminate in a way to prevent Black and brown folks from visiting their loved ones. This is done by targeting clothing with claims that a person's clothes is tight while ignoring the body shape differences between ethnicities, targeting natural interactions such as hand holding, kissing, or merely just hugging. This great disconnect has widened to areas of clothing access where the state gets money to provide 7 pairs of underwear, socks, t-shirts, and now has, over the course of years, limited access to just 3 pairs over 6 months without explanation or indication of where the money is going to. This places a burden on inmates to purchase the basic fundamentals of hygienic clothing. This is exacerbated by the fact that most Black and brown folks are denied equitable jobs and earn much less than white inmates who hold positions such as head cooks and what has been titled A slots in every position and earns a higher pay. This has manifested itself in the ability of Black and brown people to purchase needed hygiene items from the canteen, notwithstanding the fact that the items necessary for Black and brown skin and hair or care are not even available. The minimum standard is what is needed just for whites. The effects of such discriminatory treatment are vast and residual, teaching Black and brown folks that there is no place where they belong or where their humanity is respected on par with white life. The consequence is that when released, they carry that feeling of alienation. It becomes perpetual, keeping them chained to the idea that there are 2 Americas instead of 1. In other words, as the U.S. Supreme Court declared in the Dred Scott decision, the Black man has no rights that the white man has to respect. This is why we need the data bill to pass in its true form to determine who is getting access to programs and services. And that, and I know I came to the ending of my 3 minutes, but I want you guys to really understand that the grievance processes are broken. There's no relief, there's no reprieve by which one can seek unless they go through the court system, which takes a span of 5 or 6 years. So we're overburdening, and in the meantime, what ends up happening is that the administrators from the top to the bottom just kind of re-solidifies the fact of, through the denial of the grievance process, that they're in charge and there is no real accountability. And who has access to the governor? Surely not us. So this is why we need that enforcement mechanism to be passed, just as a way of making sure we get what we're entitled to. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Hudson. I did have a couple questions, Mr. Hudson. I did have a couple questions. And you work for Prisoners Legal Services.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering if you could comment, I appreciate the testimony, if you could comment about any specific examples where you experienced racism or structural racism as someone who was incarcerated.
Oh, well, there are vast and many.
I can imagine.
I am somebody, as you know, who ran cultural and religious programming while I was incarcerated. And just as recent, before I left, there was a new policy that came out that targeted solely cultural programs that was being run by Black and brown folks that attacked cultural programming from Kwanzaa, Black history, and which limit the outside community and which had taken an interest and was coming in droves, and not just in one facility, but throughout the Department of Corrections. These these cultural programs and religious programs had a revival that came out of what they call the GCCR report, which is the Governor Commission on Corrections, which was chaired by Scott Hochberger. And it dealt with the idleness in which inmates were being subjected to. So as a result, the revival of these programs were allowed, communities started to grow and flourish and participate. And then out of the blue, suddenly we get a new policy without no consultation by the department or what have you, no representation, that says now, unless we're doing workshops or retreats, every other program is now limited to only 5 outside guests. Well, now you just reduce a cultural observance into a meeting, right? A meeting of only 5 people that's packed by 65. The other challenges is that there's an overwhelming representation of Black and Latino persons who are incarcerated. But when they come out for these events, we were giving numbers like only 65 can participate, even though the venue holds over 200 people, right? So at certain facilities such as Norfolk, where that is a community prison, that's allowed, and other institutions which does not have that same capacity, we've received at this as an end result these types of decisions, structural. And I term them what I would say institutional racism on this highest level. And it's not something that is unique. It's something that's been happening since the 1970s, since the first Black commissioner, John Boone, took office, and all those white officers walked off the job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the specific examples. Are there any questions from any of my colleagues? Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate
Thank you.
Hudson.